This is my 1993 Nissan 240SX hatchback. What started off as an LS1 swap beast that I once drove to college in and even drifted with at Road Atlanta has slowly turned into the turd that it is today. From LS3 swapping it with my old man to competing in my first competitive drift event, this car holds tons of sentimental value and deserves a second chance at life. And as you can see, we got our work cut out for us. So I've spent the better part of probably 8 to 10 hours on fabbing up a tub structure for the engine bay of my 240. So I basically needed to prove to myself that I was capable of doing something like this, and I'm decently pleased with how it's turned out. And now that I know that I have the capability, we can replicate it and I can show all of you on the driver's side. And when I say this, it truly comes from the bottom of my heart. If I can do it, you can too. I basically completed the passenger side just so I wouldn't sound like such an idiot showing you guys what I was doing, because really it was just trial by fire. I went through tons of cardboard cutouts, just trying to get my templates right to make this fit and look not as OEM as possible, because what the hell, this thing doesn't look OEM, but to make it look decent given my experience. I still need to finish up the welds across the surface, grind those down, and then use a seam sealer. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do the driver's side. And to start off, we gotta get rid of the driver's side tube frame structure that goes from the strut tower down to the frame rail. That's where this boy comes into handy. Oh wait, we forgot. Safety first. There we go. Tube structure removed. And in all honesty, I wish I didn't have to do this. The problem is, with the Florida weather, if I want to actively go and drift, I gotta be able to account for the rain, and I'm not gonna have tons of water just gushing into the engine bay. So the name of the game is symmetry here. If you want the engine bay to look nice, you have to at least make the left side look like the right side and the right side look like the left side. If one tub is crooked and the other is straight, it's just gonna look funky and it's gonna bother you forever. So what I've done is just try to map out how far the passenger side tub goes behind the strut tower and make that mark on the driver's side strut tower just to try to keep it as even as possible. I used this top hat bolt as my reference point. So I had 3.5 inches roughly straight up to the side of the strut tower on the passenger side. So I just replicated that on the driver. And then I got my handy dandy cardboard and just kept trimming until I got a roughly decent fit. I also measured the height from the top of the strut tower down to the tub as another reference. And now that we're at this point, we can go ahead and transfer this template onto the tub and hope for the best. This is where it gets a little nerve-wracking because these actually weren't that expensive. So no, I'm not all that nervous. Granted, I don't want to be wasting my time, but I know the common thing to do is to run to like Tractor Supply and pick up trailer fenders. They have a 9-inch version, which absorbing all the other YouTube videos on this topic. Shout out Jimmy Oaks, your video was very helpful. The 9-inch version is a little bit too narrow to get you the full width from the fender support to the inner part of the frame rail. That's why you see I had to put this little triangular piece down the side. I did a bunch of digging and I was able to find 10-inch wide fenders off of Amazon, and they were like 27 bucks shipped. So this is definitely the route to go. Tractor Supply, I think it's like somewhere upwards of like 50 to 60 bucks for one single trailer fender. So I'll make sure to put a link down in the description for where to get these on Amazon. All right, I got my stencil traced out. Amazon, we're about to find out if you're gonna get another 27 bucks from me. All right, so I got it trimmed. I got it fitting as best as I could. I have my jack supporting it. I've measured the distance from the ground to the bottom edge of the fender. It's matching on both sides. Used my level to make sure that the tub is at least flat. I got the welder running. Let's tack this boy in. Now begins the fun part of cutting out the templates for the side piece, the bottom part that extends towards where the headlight mounts, the side piece that goes up to the fender brace, and then that little triangular cut that goes down the length to fill in the gap between the frame rail and the tub. I recommend getting lots of cardboard and a nice sharp utility knife because you're going to be making templates out the ass. So here comes the hard part that I've been struggling for with the last hour. I already have my cardboard cut out to the general shape of the backside of the fender well. I'm not trying to cover that hole right there where the brake line comes out of. So I've made a provision to cut out a little bit of material from the bottom so that we don't have to worry about needing to drill another hole for our brake line. It's not too hard to get to this point. My recommendation is just get a big enough sheet of cardboard, set it on the backside, get a Sharpie, come from the bottom, and trace out the fender arch all the way to the strut tower. And then it's a matter of revising your cardboard cutout to fit as best as possible. But now where I'm struggling is ensuring that my freshly cut stencil piece fits without needing too much persuasion. By default, it's gonna have to angle inwards to account for the distance it has to make up between the frame rail and the tub. And when I set this here and try to line it all up, it doesn't look like it lines up the best. But that's because this is a 22 gauge sheet of metal that will be tacked on the backside and then not bent to shape, but bent to contour against the tub. And that's where it gets a little difficult and where you start second guessing yourself on your cuts. So I didn't mention it, but I did source 2 sheets of 4x4 22 gauge steel from Tractor Supply. It was a little pricey. The 22 gauge isn't thin enough to be pliable, but isn't thick enough to not be workable. So I definitely recommend going the 22 gauge route. All right, it's tacked in. You might notice that there are some decent gaps in between both materials, especially maybe down right here where it goes to the strut tower. Now, the secret that I've learned is to use a copper backing plate. The weld won't stick to it, but it will allow the weld to form on top and bridge the gap. If you don't have this, you run the risk of burning through your base metal, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So I'll go ahead and follow up on some of the tacks with this and fill in those gaps. I'll go ahead and put an Amazon link in the description for this tool as well. It comes with 3 different plates of various different sizes depending on what it is that you're welding. All right, fast forward a couple days, I got the driver's side knocked out. I work a full-time job, so I really just wanted to focus on getting it all complete, but I can run you through again really what you gotta do. All this cardboard should be evident. Measure once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, cut once, and then once you cut, shape to fit it. It does look pretty decent. I will say I have a couple of gaps that I'm gonna have to try to fill in a little bit more. Nonetheless, one thing I don't think I clarified, you don't have to buy 2 trailer fenders. You just buy 1 and then split it directly in half. And then as a learning lesson that I could pass on to you guys, when you split the trailer fender in half, use the cut end for the section that goes down towards the frame rail. That way you won't have to make a weird rounded cut to fill in that gap. You're gonna have to trim some back anyways if this section were to be used up here, which makes a lot more sense and would give you a nice straight cut down there to match your metal up to. One thing that you can do to save time, the templates that you cut on one side can be used for the other. Now it won't be an exact 1-to-1 fit, but it's enough to where you won't have to spend the time using cardboard to trace out your outline. I know I just kind of glanced over the fact that I have a welder, and here she is, your good old Harbor Freight Omni Pro 220. For those of you that aren't all that familiar with welding, which I wasn't when I first got this, it's kind of foolproof. There are certain settings that you can use depending on the gauge size of wire you use and then the thickness of the metal. And since we're using 16 gauge steel, obviously, we'll set the thickness to 16 gauge. We're MIG welding and we're using C25 shielding gas. Now I'm not gonna show you how to weld because I technically don't really know how. Tack welding is super simple, but honestly, don't be afraid if you're looking to get into welding. Just go out and do it and watch a few basic how-to videos on YouTube. It does take a lot of patience to do this. And for someone that has 0 fab experience, I'm pretty stoked on it, but we're not done. So now at this point, I've grinded down the welds and I have prepped the metal for a self-etching primer. It's scuffed, but we still need to apply prep all before we apply the paint. I'm not gonna apply the seam sealer just yet. I wanna wait for when I paint the engine bay, which I don't know when that will be, hopefully soon. But when that time comes, I already have the 3M stuff right here. Just use a standard old caulk gun for it. Then I have my self-etching primer that we'll go ahead and use just to keep the welds and the metal from rusting. We'll use a little bit of this prep all and a rag to remove all dirt and residue. Look who we have here hanging out in the garage. Our little friend Django. Say hi, buddy. No? Well, you don't want to be in here when we paint. So why don't you go inside. Now, I'm not too worried about overspray in this case because the whole car or whole engine bay, everything's going to be repainted. Like I said, we just want that protection of the bare metal. All right, everything's painted in the primer. And I think that's how we're gonna leave it for today. Overall, I do think it looks pretty decent. Don't want any of you to think that I'm trying to show off something in such an amazing condition because I am so good at this, because I'm not. But hey, if you're willing to learn and willing to put yourself out there to try something that is completely out of your realm, then good for you, keep it up. You're already a million steps ahead of a lot of other people. So with that said, I hope you guys have an awesome day and I'll see you next time. Peace.